Welcome to the Stars Align Dramas and Dreams podcast, where the infinite sky meets the starry world of dramas. We're your guides to the cosmos, from heart-stopping queer love stories to straight dramas of unexpected love.
And every unforgettable moment in between that make us swoon, laugh, and cry. And, of course, we'll sprinkle in a little stardust along the way.
I'm Nixie.
I'm Cyrus.
Each week, we'll explore the stellar journey of love, identity, and connection, one drama and one dream at a time.
So, gather your stardust, find your spot under the stars, and let's dive in.
This week, we're casting our gaze upon comedy from different countries, letting the stars guide us through the exciting and vast world it holds.
To start our exploration, we need to understand one thing. What is comedy and why does it matter?
Such basic question.
Yeah. Sometimes that's just how it be, you know?
And it's very necessary because, that's the topic of the story. That's the topic of the episode. And it's how comedy is interacted and is created. And to be honestly, I say it's a simple question, but if you really think about it, comedy is different for every person. How you perceive one thing could be funny for one person and not for another.
Yeah. Comedy is deeply, personal to each individual, and it can mean a million different things.
So comedy just is perceived differently from person to person, but in this sense of our discussion, it is going to be your change of emotion, typically in humor, in the form of how it's presented physically, edit form, may that be expression, may it be, we can talk about, may it be through words, actions. I know I've repeated some of these, but that's okay. I know there's more. It's not coming to my head at the very moment as I'm talking. But there are so many ways comedy can be expressed. And that's one of my favorite things to look into when watching when watching other countries. And there's a bunch of elements you can pull to compare from country to country. You can compare what's romance like in every country, and it's vastly different. What's sadness, what's life troubles in every country, and you can either find things that are similar, you yourself,
Their own experience,
or different that makes them unique to themselves. For this specific episode, we are focusing on the comedy aspects and how those are expressed and portrayed in dramas from these different countries. And I want to note this, we are going to mainly specifically talk about Thailand, China, and Japan. There are a multitude of ones we could also pull from. But for this series episode, these are also our main focus and interest as it is in our dramas and what we typically watch. And especially when it comes to comedy, these are the ones that we tend to think of the most from what our collection of shows. So this will be the highlight
Our
focus.
repertoire.
I might bring some in later, but that is a later thing. And so this is going to be a comedy-based topic about how they're portrayed differently. And just something for people to think about. If you ever want to really observe, and if you're really keen on watching different countries and how they do things. And to a certain extent that this is going to get broken down to if you want to go beyond the comedy after the end of this, is that this goes beyond to film aspects or storytelling aspects. So this is something that we could honestly do Gen episodes over, just breaking down differences from country to country for so many different things. But like I said, comedy, so important. And in this episode, like I said, it's the main focus. It's going to be the humor side of everything. And it's very important because it's one of the strongest emotions that can be portrayed in series, and sometimes the most easiest things to be portrayed in a series.
Yeah. And it's used for so many different things. It's used just for the simple, I say simple, but just for the humor of it all. But it also can be used and is often used to release tension and lighten the mood of a series. So it's not all bummer.
Or a coping mechanism for a character.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is some of my favorite portrays in series, especially with the use of comedy.
Yes.
And so it's extremely important.
Absolutely.
Matters a lot.
Since we now understand the basics, let's break down the constellation of how comedy changes across cultures, mapping out the stars that connect to reveal the deeper layers of meaning we're exploring.
To navigate this constellation, we'll be focusing on the sound effect-driven comedy of Thailand, the physical comedy of Japan, and China's masterful implementation of subtle comedy.
We start our exploration with the sound effects of Thailand, where we'll examine the heart of comedy in different cultures and explore how it's essential to understanding comedy in Thai dramas.
If there's anything I've learned when it comes to watching Thai dramas, is that they heavily rely on sound effects for comedy. And I'm not saying that's because they don't express it verbally or express it through like actions. They do, because that's another thing, is they're kind of they're very expressive too, but
yeah,
you can tell it's much more heavier relied on like the sound effects. Like Thai PL specifically, it's sort of shifted out of this, but there was a time period that anytime it referred to possible NC scenes, it was a horse sound.
The horse sound? Hated that.
I'm
so glad that's
an
not
example, though.
a thing.
But that's an example.
It is. I'm just so glad they don't use it as much.
They don't. Now. They still do.
Occasionally, but it's not as prevalent.
But they use a lot other sounds as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes that might be a sound effect like the horse sound, or it might be something as simple as just cutting a noise off. Like, for example, this actually happens in other countries as well, because it is a form of comedy, and these aspects are shared across each other. It just depends on how it's expressed that makes it very unique. And so this example does, because I'm saying this because people will point it out, does exist in other shows in other countries. But it is an example I'm just trying to pull up, is another big one that they're known for is like, say it's supposed to be a really sweet moment, and like we've got music playing and you got this nice little melody, and then boom, it's gone, and some other character says something fucking off. Yes, and like this, and then another character just like, and there's no actual record scratch, but like it just abruptly stops, and then you just get a character say something absolutely stupid.
So unhinged.
Which also, for Thailand, follows another sound half the time, with it being usually like a sound effect in this case. And that is usually just like a abrupt stop. Sometimes it is literally the sound effect of a car hitting the brakes. Like this, I'm not even joking. And so like they use sound so much in Thai dramas with their comedy, and like nothing wrong with that. Love that. That's always when we're talking about it, and that's just something that's very prominent. And like sound effects and stuff like this, obviously used in other series. But like I'm telling you, if you were to compare them to other countries, it is heavily used in their dramas. And I know it's a beautiful thing, but their comedy, and like sure, they're able to do comedy without sound effects. It's just not often that they try to. It just, because what sticks for them, and that's just sounds. You can tell they heavily rely on their audio more than anything, which is fascinating, because I will say sometimes little outside of the comedy aspect, but into their sound design aspect, I will say you can tell they have some rough recordings here and there sometimes. I remember watching a show with one of my friends, and immediately they were like, oh, I can hear that sound maxing out. Like it's literally hitting top, like it's screeching. Like, and I was like, you're right. It is. And like there's nothing wrong with that. That happens. Sometimes it's hard to control the environment, especially if it's a loud environment. Like I've literally seen scenes where like a character's talking, and while they're talking the sound's there, but then it cuts because they stop talking, and it's like a different room note, like an empty room tone. And so like that's very common. But I just wanted to point that out, because like that's just a little fun little film aspect thing. If you ever want to ruin your day, I'm just kidding. If you want to look into like listening into the series more and noticing these things, there are some sound designs in Thailand that I've noticed that get disrupted because of that. And it's not just them; it happens in every country. I've even spotted it in Guardian. Does that? It happens in an outdoor scene there. Actually, 2 scenes, to the point that there was one time I can tell there was an audio recording, like a voiceover in certain scenes, because it sounded, the tone of it was so different from the other scenes around it. So like it's a completely normal thing.
And then there's also this one part of the Heart Killers where specifically I want to say a dunk take, where like you could definitely tell there was like mic issues or sound issues. and they just didn't, they couldn't fix it, so it's in there.
Sometimes you can. Sometimes you can't fix it.
Yeah.
Like, ideally, you hope in post that you're able to do what's called reshooting or retakes and stuff like that, which isn't always easy to do. And sometimes you can't, because maybe there's a location you can't rebook to be able to reshoot it. Or even doing a voiceover isn't able to fix the sounds that were captured wrong or sometimes completely missing, which I've seen that too. I've seen sounds completely where they say something, it might be just a really short sentence and it's gone. Like, there's nothing that comes out of their mouth, and that happens. But back to their comedy side, another thing I'd love to point out is we talk about how they have heavily on their sound. They also rely heavily with their sounds because it kind of goes hand in hand. Like, sure, they can use their sounds and get away with just being heavily comedic with their sounds, but they're also really good at using editing, like edit cuts to create their comedy. Like, some of the others do this too, and I'll probably end up bringing it up like in the Chinese one as well. But with their sounds, like what I was talking about earlier, for example, the example I brought up, which was like it's very sweet and something, and then it jumps to another scene of someone else. Like, you know what? Just thought of one, like the perfect scene. And Cyrus, ironically, has not caught up at this point of this recording to this scene in the series, but I have already told you about this scene. I can't remember if I sent you the clip of the scene or not. I think I did, but it's the scene in a series called Caged Again, where the two main leads ended up like kissing or whatnot, and it's a very sweet moment. And their friends, they had been playing like a spin the bottle game where like truth or dare, and one of the leads, so it's Junior and Sun. Junior ended up being the one that got to tell Sun the truth or dare, and Sun said truth, and he says, then tell me that, do you like me? I think it was just the question. And then he says, then I pick dare, and Junior was like, okay, then kiss me. Like, he's like, you're like, there's no way out of this. And so he ended up doing the dare, and it was so funny because like it's such a sweet little moment and everything. And then it jumps to the two friends who had returned on the backside of the couch, and one just goes, gotta love this is gotta love. And the other friend just covers his mouth, and he's like, and starts dragging him away. Like, it's the way it was cut and the way they filmed that shot, to the point that there are a lot of times while watching Thai dramas, because of that style of comedy, that I go into a lot of their dramas and I come across a scene like that, for example, and I immediately go, something's gonna happen. Someone's watching. It's gonna jump to someone's gonna say something. Someone's going to be around the corner or something, and it's just going to turn very comedic. Because, like, I just always expect a comedic moment sometimes. Like, I'll see, you don't understand how many kiss, like, almost, sometimes actual kiss scenes that I've seen that I'm like, it's going to get interrupted by something. Like, I swear it's going to. Like, it's in that perfect setting. It doesn't always happen, but I expect it because it's Thailand.
Yeah, I think that is the reason why in Your Sky, when, like, Real and Hia are having their moment, and we're just like, Munfa is literally right over there, and like we kept expecting like something to happen, and it didn't. But like it's the expectation.
Uncharacteristic. It was uncharacteristic, but it was so funny because watching that scene, I was like, Moonfa's over there, but Moonfa's over there. Like, guys, you're having this sweet moment, and this man's just right over there on his computer, seeing and hearing all of this. And it never showed him up until the end when he started, like, he's like, we're gonna leave. And then Moonfa's just like, cool. And so I was so expecting something comedic. Now I get why they didn't for that part of the story. But because it's Thailand, I'm always prepared that something so wild and comedic is gonna happen at literally any second of a show that gets where the moment. And a lot of times, even when moments get intense, I expect something to just some tension to break, because that is something they do a lot. And I think that's why a lot of their dramas that they release end up being heavily comedy related, because of the fact that when things get serious in their series, at some point, somehow, a character is going to say something so left field.
And this is heavily on GMMTV. Heavily on the GMMTV.
And so I That's how I expect it when I'm watching Thai series. I'm like, something's fixing to happen. I know the comedy's fixing to hit somewhere. More likely, just listen to the audio and you'll know. Like, I swear Thailand's one of those countries that, yes, this sound element that we're talking about in Thailand happens, like I said before, it happens across everyone else too. And I'm sure the same thing could apply. But especially for Thailand, if you were to close your eyes, listen to a scene, and only listen to sound effects, like if you were able to somehow cut off like the dialogue alone, I'm 100% positive you would have a clue of exactly where the exact points in which what is happening, it turns comedic.
Yeah.
Because of just the style of editing for Thailand.
Absolutely.
And I love that so much.
It's a lot of fun.
But with that being said, we shift our orbits and we find ourselves in Japan's physical comedy. This new path takes us deeper into comedy across countries, uncovering hidden connections and unfolding new layers.
Japanese people are so expressive and it's so endearing.
It's definitely something heavily rooted in their actual culture itself. But in shows, especially ones that are meant to be heavily comedic, and sometimes I think I've seen shows that weren't necessarily comedic to a certain degree, and I think it's just the nature of their culture. Like, they know how to do things not comedic and stuff like that, because, like, you know,
they have like plenty
revered,
of dramas.
And I was also going to say, they're revered for their horror.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So like they're absolutely capable of a completely different form.
Yeah.
Of like emotions and stuff like that. But one of the biggest things I've noticed watching dramas for Japan is their physical comedy in the way they express things is unmatched. Like,
yeah.
And I thought Thailand's expressive, like, physical thing is crazy, because sometimes it is too in their comedy, and I know we didn't bring it up, but it still has no match to Japan, because like the biggest examples, like if you want to see what I'm talking about, is watch a series that does a crossover between Japan and Thailand, which I know is not easy to happen, but it's also not easy to happen because you don't see it that ridiculously often. You don't see a lot of crossovers. I mean, recently we have. More recently though.
Yeah.
It's still a low number regardless. But if you watch the interactions, physical comedy is drastically different. One of these biggest examples would be watch the remake, and it's in the special episode of Love in the Air Japanese version, where they introduce and where they reintroduce the original Prapai and Payu, which is Boss and Fort, and the way those interact is physically different.
Yes.
Their actions are different, and I know Sky and Rain also had their physical comedy in the Thai version, but it is so different in the Japanese one. It is expressed way more heavily. Their actions are way more exaggerated, and it's just so different.
Yeah.
to be honest with you. So yeah, if you're able to find a series, like, either that be in my original suggestion, which was like find a scene where you actually see these two different cultures actually interact with each other, which, like I said, isn't actually that often.
Yeah.
But it happens. Like I said, the special episode has that interaction. I think this is even seeable and noticeable in Cherry Magic, where their boss is Japanese. And like, he's not crazy expressive like you think of the comedy in Japan, but he's expressive enough that there's still pretty much a difference in his actions that kind of were like very hint the Japanese style of how they act in their dramas. And I love that. And then there's the other way that you can do this little comparison if you ever want to, and that is like watch a Japanese version and then watch a remake of that version. And that's a Thai version, which is recently being done. Like, there's quite a few of them. There's 3 of those and 1 of the other way around, where it's a Thai series became a Japanese series. So that's one way to do that observation if you want a comparison method of that.
It's kind of an older example that like doesn't have a Thai connection as of yet. Who knows at this point? But talking about how we mentioned a little bit about it earlier, about how even in like series that aren't necessarily comedy focused, like the like physical comedy of Japan kind of still like shines through is Kayakyaku.
Yes. I haven't thought about that, but you're right.
Because like that series is so dramatic, so much happens.
It was supposed to be pretty
But
serious of a series, but like their acting in their comedy form, very
yeah.
expressive. Like we said, physical expression, verbal expression, very heavy there in Japanese culture wise for their shows.
That was the last example that I had specifically.
And that's a good example.
Thank you.
Also, if you've never seen Kayakyaku, highly recommend it. It's a
Highly
good series. It might not be a bromance or an actual BL, but it is 100%
so
on my
good.
BL list as a bromance because it's so good and it
we've
has
counted
those
less
heavy
as
vibes.
more.
We've counted less as one, absolutely. We're Delulu here, okay?
Yeah.
We're not Delulu. Don't know why you're here. We're Delulu in an understandable level, okay? I know when to draw a line on a Delulu. I meant that in terms of like, I don't take this to the actors.
Yeah. Gotcha.
I'm going to say, I'm not that Delulu. I'm not going to do this upon the actors. I mean, I'll do little ships for fun.
Yeah.
But like, I know when people are people, but characters, if I can, I'm going to do Delulu all I want on characters and how I'm going to view them.
Sometimes we do the most insane mental gymnastics and like, we're going to count it anyway.
I've literally counted a series of bromance when one of the leads had a female interest. Just because the bromance was that strong for me, I was like, yes. But luckily, I'm able to sort it out and actually divide what's actually my actual BO total and my actual like bromance total, like actually separated.
Yeah.
Now it is in one big list together, but like if I had to like figure it out, it's not that hard.
Finally, our third focus is the subtle yet impeccably implemented comedy of China. This is where we highlight its significance in understanding the deeper layers of comedy in Chinese dramas.
While 100% China is very much capable of doing scenes that are expressive like the Japanese ones or sound effects like the Thai ones, I think when it comes to the comedy, the one I always revere as their most like impeccable choice and like what they are the best at is subtle comedy. And that
so
is having a series that somehow is supposed to be so deep and so meaningful, make it so hilarious to watch. The biggest example of this is Fangs of Fortune.
Oh, yes.
There were so many people, and I think that's just, it was misinterpreted in how the comedy was presented in this series, that they were like, oh my gosh, why are they making jokes at most awkward and inappropriate times? It's like, yeah, because this is a very dark series, and comedy and tension needs to be broken at some point. And so a lot of these characters' coping mechanism was comedy. And I loved that about them. It was also very subtle. Sometimes it was done through editing. Sometimes it was done through words. And sometimes it was done through sounds. Like, like an editing sound one. Combination of the two would have been like the casket scene where like they come across the thing and Great Demon's like he's like, this looks like, everyone's talking and then all of a sudden he's like, this looks nice, and he's inside the casket like just sitting it like observing it, and everyone's like, what the heck, which is a comedy masterpiece of its own. And they're like, what are you doing in like this casket and stuff like that? He's like, I wonder. And like he's like lays back and he's like, who's gonna come with me? And he ends up dragging baby Jew. Baby Jew, who's screaming for his absolute life. He literally gets jerked into the coffin, and he starts screaming and gets his mouth clapped by covered by Great Demon, and the lid just closes on him. Everyone's like, yeah, cool, let's do this. Baby Jew is like screaming for his absolute life, and then they disappear. And that's a comedy piece on its own while portraying the story. Like, it's subtle because like it's okay, it doesn't feel subtle because it's outright comedy, but it's subtle in the sense that it's a type of comedy where in other countries like Thailand or Japan, their comedy kind of like disrupts the story. While like it still tells the story, but it like disrupts it, like it ruins a moment and stuff like that. Their comedy is more of the sense of somehow it continues the story. Not always, but it continues the story. Like, him doing that was just like a funny moment of how they're like literally progressing the story of closing the coffin. Like, it just happens because, to be that form.
And like, because of things that are happening in the narrative, like Baby Jew like had to go with Great Demon to save another character. So like, they had to find a way to get Baby Jew and Great Demon. I refuse to call him Baiju.
Me either. I call him Baby Jew because he's that baby. Love this little child. Or another comedy, an editing comedy, subtle comedy in their editing form, and that's a scene where this happened, I think, 2 to 3 times in the series, and it always revolved around Great Demon to the point that I swear he was intentionally setting this up.
Oh, yeah.
And 2 of them was Yi-chan, and then one of them was
Paisajing.
And one of them was Paisajing. And the 2 with Yi-chan involved where Wen Chao, most cases, was talking to Great Demon about Yi-chan, and Yi-chan's like, is like making comments about Yi-chan, like, you know, how he's not that great or whatnot. And like, and every time he would do that, Yi-chan, it would cut to him sneezing. To the point that I think the first time it happened, he sneezed 2 times, and then the second time was grabbed his whole sword, like, someone's got to be talking about me. And to the point that I was fully believing that, like I said, Great Demon was setting this up. Because, like, later there's another scene with Paisajing where he's describing everyone. And, like, I think he was like, I don't remember what was being said. Oh, I remember now. Baby Jew, he was trying to impress Baby Jew with the little thing that he made for him for his little medicine stuff. Like, he could literally pop up a thing, and he was trying to be impressive, but Baby Jew wasn't having it, and he was like literally saying pretty much almost everyone else but how impressive Great Demon was, to the point that he gets to Paisajing, and he's like, Paisajing's not that strong, she's pretty weak. And then she's trying to walk over these steps that she almost trips going down them. And so, like,
and she just stops and like looks around.
Yeah, she's like, what just happened? Like, I love the comedy that was in Things of Fortune. And it's not just Things of Fortune. This happens in so many other series. And for China, may that be a subtle change in an expression of characters. Like, it could be something as simple as like the way like they express them physical, like on their face, like a facial. Or it could be something in the background that's just comedically done, and it's so stupid, but it's not like hugely presented in the story or not, and I love that.
Can we talk about this Faberlum? There's like this whole like arc of Razan. That's not how you pronounce that.
Rainenza.
Thank you. Or Nanza. And oh my gosh, what is it? Lingjisha, thank you.
Or Ling Ling, whichever one you prefer.
Ling Ling. Where they're in
Rainenza would call him a Ling Ling.
Ling Ling. In a dorm, and the white deer leader is just like, I like Baija?
Yes, Baija, which was ideally the sister to Rainenza. Newsflash, it was not. It was Rainenza.
It's just straight up Nanza.
Cross-dressing.
He's just like, well, I want, if we're talking specifically the series, and it's just like, well, I would like my sister to have someone like Ling Ling. Like, that entire arc was so funny.
I think that was actually the 4th door, because in no, it was like the I think it was the 5th door. If I remember on top of my head, I used to know this series like the back of my hand, door by door, when it came to the series. The only thing I'm struggling with, so it is the 4th door for them, because left-hander comes in before, which is ironic because I think it's a left foot, but left-hander I think came in before the nurse one, the nursing home. So then yes, that is the correct door. It's the 4th door. I think it's technically the 5th door. I don't think it's in the correct order, because the series, he does go through a few more doors without us seeing it, because like there's one where like a practice door. I just don't remember where it takes place. But in terms of doors we actually see us enter, it was his 4th door. And at first, in the 3rd doors when we first met,
I don't remember his name, and I feel awful about it.
He had 2 names. The white deer,
The white deer
leader. I usually can remember his name, but I can't off the top of my head. Where he told everyone that who he liked was Renbaija. And then in the following door, they end up running into each other again. And in this door, Ren'Nzu was Ren'Nzu. And actually, I guess he's Ren'Nzu for everyone except for the first door. But in the book, he plays Ren'Baija a lot. Did he play Ren'Baija in the book in that door or not? I can't remember now. I can't. But anyways, in what was, I think Brian Drama listed as left-hander, which never makes sense to me because she was missing her left leg. But I digress. In that door, he ends up thinking about the fact that Ren'Baija was not only Ren'Nzu's sister, but he also believes that she's also one of his like fellow like what they call them, group members. And so he thought, if I got close to Ren'Nzu, then I can get close to Ren'Baija. So the entirety of that door is Ren'Nzu, purposely trying to take off the white deer leader. And
just
to
for
a certain
just for shits and giggles.
To a certain extent, this involved putting Ling Ling a little bit on tight ropes, which was absolutely hilarious because it was funny because he never tried anything absolutely bad to Ling Ling, but you could tell that anytime he did get almost close to doing something, Ren'Nzu was like, "Don't you dare! Don't you dare!" Like, I might be purposely putting my baby Ling Ling on the line here, but don't you dare. I will say this series is labeled bromance because of censorship, but it is based on a same-sex adaptation. So highly, highly recommend The Spiral.
Yeah, it's so good.
So good. The bromance in it, honestly, you can feel that it was a same-sex novel. Like, they portrayed what they could very well for a censored series. And I'm so glad it just made it through censorship and was able to even be fully aired. But moving on, the comedy in that series and like just the way he would like one of the scenes for, I guess, subtlety wise would be like where Ren'Nzu and Ling Ling are trying to a certain degree hint without telling him, the white deer leader, that he really did not want to, that Baiju was not who he thought it was, who thought she was, quotation marks. And to the point that at the same time, it goes back to Ninja making a comment being like, I'm gonna like have to say that, someone like Ling Ling is like who I want to see as, a brother-in-law. And like this makes the white deer leader mad or so, and he kind of like glares at Ling Ling. And Ren'Nzu turns away to like go to do business to continue the story, and Ling just like rolls his eyes and like rolls his shoulders because he's like, I don't even know what to do anymore. He's like, I'm so done. And it was so funny. Or another scene is where, because Ren'Nzu loves poking at people, like he loves just like triggering people. It's so hilarious.
Oh, absolutely.
There was a girl that was with the white deer leader in that same door who liked the white deer leader, but the white deer leader didn't notice that. And so, because she was jealous of Baija, who was not there, Ren'Nzu took advantage of this. And like, there's one scene where they're in the cafeteria, and they're like, I know how, like, trying to debate how many chickens they're gonna get, chicken legs they're, and they're like, I'm gonna get one. And it's like, then I'm gonna get two, then I'm gonna get 3, 4, and it goes all the way like what, 6 or 7, and they end up getting the chickens, and she ends up losing against him. But the comedy aspect of it was like the way it just panned back and forth between. It was more of an editing comedy back and forth between them going back and going like 1, 2, like it was hilarious. And so that's another series that has really good subtlety acting. I will say we did probably point out less subtle comedy aspects in that series, but it had loads of others.
Yeah.
Especially because that series definitely is dark. Because I wouldn't say it's gory, but it kind of is. I mean, it's literally the idea based around, imagine, it's essentially if, how did I word it in my edit? It was virtual reality meets escape rooms. but it's life or death. And if you don't make it out of the door, if you die in the door, you die in real life. So it was like I said, virtual reality meets escape rooms, and like you have to get out, but you repeat it over and over and over until you ideally were supposed to go through 12 doors, and it's well done. Which
it is very good.
I love it when it's comedy expressed through like the most subtle expressions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I like them all. I wouldn't be watching the Japan ones or the Taiwan ones and stuff like that if I didn't like crazy expression, because they definitely have it.
Nixie's favorite thing is rom-coms.
It is. It is. Almost all the shows I've watched is rom-coms in most cases. It's why I don't watch a lot of crime ones. I do occasionally, but most of the time it's always usually rom-com based with other elements around it. And like, I'd have to say like 95% of my stuff is rom-com. So I love some good comedy for sure. And so that's why I just like watching the different types. It's why I have so much to say about the comedies. We've broken everything down. Now it's time to put it all together. In this segment, we'll share our thoughts on the way comedy changes across countries and cultures as a full constellation and reflect on its total impact. I think when it comes to the overall look back to all of them, they all have the potential to have similarities for sure, because it is a genre. And the biggest thing about genres is that there is a pattern, there is a setup for those genres. And this is across multitude of things. This could be like romance, it could be crime, this could be a mystery. There's that specific setup. Same with the comedy. It's the same way both in storytelling as it is in cinematography as it is in film. There is different style of editings. It's why when you're watching something, typically maybe if you're watching something crime based, it's usually a lot darker. The scenes are shot where like more obscure, like you can't really see things clearly, versus if you're watching something comedic, a lot of times it's set up like sitcom style, not quite, but it's set up where like it's obvious, like it's right there in front of your face.
Yeah.
Or if it's and then or maybe color grading plays into these factors, like depending on the mood of the story plays into like how it comes out. But even so, there's a formula to it all, and so there's gonna be similarities across all the countries. And this isn't just the three we talked about, this is all of the countries, even the ones we haven't talked about or we didn't bring up in this. And so that's very possible, but there's also a play on cultures, influences, and how they best are suited for themselves. Yeah. And like the biggest example being how a lot of Japanese ones, the comedy for them is very expressive, mainly because that's just the culture. It's just very expressive, very silly. Like if you look at a lot of, if you're big in like the music industry, so if you look at a lot of artists, like especially like K-pop artists are from Japan, biggest example of this is going to be like Soul.
Yeah.
From P1
P1
Harmony.
Harmony.
Such a silly little guy.
Such a silly guy.
So if you went to compare him to everyone else, very different. His culture, the way he grew up, you can tell was very different. That's not a bad thing. That's a beautiful thing.
No, it's beautiful.
And it influences, as it should, the drama industry as well, and how they portray these different genres, such as comedy. And it's not just them, like I said, it's across all the others. Yeah. But each one has their own unique abilities. You just have to look at it and really analyze it all to see it.
Overall, I think comedy is like a universal thing. While like being extremely like personal to every individual, which is something I don't think many things can say about themselves. So it's really interesting to like kind of analyze comedy as a whole and like break it down into kind of how culture and like countries impact it. Especially when like there is like crossover between each, but like you can still like pinpoint like what a culture is kind of best at, I guess, in a sense. and like what like their like specialty is, and like what like being able to like pinpoint like those aspects is like really fun, I would say.
For sure. And just like that, the constellation is fully drawn. We thank you for joining us for this episode of Stars Align Dramas and Dreams podcast, where we meet amongst the stars that illuminate the love stories that light up our universe and connect us all.
If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe, and share your stardust and thoughts with us. We'd love to hear your comments, favorite moments, or suggestions for what we should explore next.
You can connect with us in the comments or through our socials, as well as our email that are linked in the description. Let's keep the conversation going under the stars.
Until next time, keep dreaming, keep listening, and remember, love always shines brightest in the cosmos. Bye.